Hey YouTube, I'm Ali, welcome to the channel. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at our third interview with a game designer, understanding where game ideas come from. Now, we've talked about original ideas, we've talked about theme and mechanics in the previous two interviews. Today, I'm speaking to someone who's actually built games on a license that already exists. In this case, we're looking at Ghostbusters, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, to name but two. So, enough of me talking, it's time to crack on, but of course first I need to beg for those subs. Watch me beg. Very subtly done though. So my interviewee today is a guy called Jon Cohn, and as is tradition in these little interviews, I started by asking Jon to introduce himself and give a little bit of a background as to how he got into game design in the first place.
All right. Hey, I'm Jon Cohn. I'm a board game designer based in San Diego, California. I've been making games for about 5 years now. I have about 7 games currently on the market and a few more that are going to be coming out in the next year or so. My first game I made was called King of the Creepies. It came out back in 2017, I think. I got into it. I've been a lifelong board gamer, lifelong video gamer. My board game beginnings actually starts in video games. As a kid, I used to play tons of Nintendo 64 with my friends. Xbox, we used to all come over and we'd all sit on the couch together and play video games. As technology kind of got more advanced and the industry sort of changed to be video games are now you're kind of sitting by yourself and you're playing online with other people. I don't really like that. So I feel like there was a real space to move back into those kind of analog days of let's all have a reason to hang out together and do something as a group. And so board games became sort of that for me, a really great excuse to get together with my friends, sit down, have some laughs and play a game. And so I got back into playing a lot of board games. I've always been a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. I've been a DM for 18 years, 15 years, somewhere around there. I've been playing games like Magic the Gathering, which is a kind of, for my money, the best resource you could have in learning to design games because it gets you very familiar with working around rules and structure. And so all of those things together sort of helped give me the foundation to go out there and try and make some games for myself.
With the introductions done and dusted, it was time to go in there with my reporting instinct and ask that first all-important question. Where did Jon get his ideas from?
Yeah, it depends on the project, really. If it's something that I'm doing for myself that I'm going to be pitching, because there's two ways of designing a game. You're either doing it on spec with the intention of either self-publishing or taking it to a publisher, pitching it. There's also when you're designing for licenses, which more often than not happens by a publisher reaching out to you and asking to do a commission job. So if it's projects that I'm making on myself, then yeah, the design ideas come to me, whatever I'm doing. If I'm mostly from playing other games, you get ideas and you think, well, gosh, this would be cool if it was a little different or something like that. And then you kind of take that kernel of an idea and you flesh it out into its own thing. But for something like designing for a license, like, I made Dragonball Z over 9000 or Ghostbusters Blackout. Designing for something like that, you really have to start with the license and kind of form your ideas around that.
It's worth pointing out that Jon is echoing what the previous interviewees had said about playing lots of games and looking at lots of rule books and story ideas to maybe draw upon those. I'm interrupting Jon because the next thing I wanted to know about really was about the licensing, how he managed to get hold of that. Was it simply the fame and the glory that already preceded his name that allowed multitudes of licensees to turn up at his door?
Well, first to dispel any notions of well known or fame. It's not that. The hustle is real. It is a constant grind to go out there and say, hey, I'm a guy, I make games, I can do this. Specifically for Munchkin Ninja Turtles, that was kind of an interesting story, actually. I was pitching a game that I had made that I can talk about it because I don't think it's ever coming out. It was called Cat Dungeon, and it was a game that was, I would say, had some similarities to Munchkin. It was a dungeon delving game where you would have to make temporary alliances and then break them. But it was all within the package of cats. And so I was pitching that around, and unfortunately I was just a little bit too late on the cat games train. Cats had sort of come and gone by that point, but the design in their publishers were interested in. They just didn't really like the theme, and I was not well enough known as a designer then to really have someone taking a chance on me for that. But I did meet with IDW, and I pitched it to them, and they remembered my pitch at being sort of Munchkin-esque. And so when the opportunity came for them to publish a collaboration with Steve Jackson Games, Munchkin Ninja Turtles, they came to me and asked me if that was something I would be interested in, since I had just made a game that shared some DNA with the Munchkin series.
What a great story. It demonstrated to me that not all ideas are going to end up as games, but they can still be fruitful if you pursue them, or pursue the process of developing them at least. And secondly, it demonstrated once again the importance of sharing the idea. In fact, Jon went on to expand upon this notion a little more.
Ideas come anywhere, right? It's in any industry or in any creative medium, ideas are built off of the scaffolding of other ideas. If you've already got board games is such a great example because your resources, your physical assets are pretty much similar from game to game. You're going to have cards, you're going to have dice, you're going to have boards or standees or miniatures or whatever. And so you can't really reinvent the wheel when it comes to those things. Those are the tried and true assets that you're working with. So it's inevitable that you're going to have some overlap with other people. And that's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you've made your product unique and brought your own ideas to the table. There's definitely a difference between copying something and then being inspired by something and creating something new from there. Same thing happens with writers and movies and books. You see people and it's like, oh, he's a Han Solo type character. We know where that grounding is, that basis, and that is a great template for us to build something new off of what's already been established.
We spoke a little bit more about mechanics and then moved on to the subject of theme. As someone who had designed licensed games, I asked Jon whether he'd ever gone actively after something that was popular. And conversely, in terms of themes or licenses, was there anything that he was shying away from or something that he had to be extra cautious of?
Right. Well, yeah. So I tried to do that once with the cats. I tried to capitalize on something that was really popular, and it kind of came back and bit me in the butt. So sure. I would say you have to have an idea of where the industry is going. I mean, I wouldn't make a game right now that's like roll to move, because the roll to move mechanic is so outdated right now that unless you have a really, really good reason for it, it's just going to feel old. It's not going to feel like it works elegantly. And that's kind of where I was also saying before, how you kind of build on scaffolding of other ideas and things. Roll to move has been done to death, so now we have a lot of new elegant solutions. So that would kind of be a taboo thing, I guess. The other thing, like I have to be a little cagey right now. So I like to make games that have a lot of narrative presence to them. Like Grindhouse is a game that's coming out in stores very soon, and it's a heavily narrative horror game. I'm working on another horror game right now that's a licensed one, and it's you want to have these themes, you want to have the things that people are going to latch onto and enjoy in horror. But this is a license. Again, I have to be very cagey. It's a popular horror license, but it's got some elements that maybe don't work as well in 2019 as they may have in 2005. And so I am designing right now with a very critical eye on that. Exactly, that is what's in good taste right now and what's in bad taste, especially within the horror genre, which can be a little tough in and of itself because it is kind of limiting as far as your audience. You have to be into kind of the gross horror stuff. And so, yeah, there are definitely things that are taboo. There are definitely things that you want to stay away from. Trying to design on the other side, trying to design for something that you think is popular, you really have to be well ahead of the curve. If you're looking at things and seeing like, oh, Wasteland type games are really popular right now. With the process of making a game, it takes at least a year from pitching to when it's released. So, who knows if Wasteland games are still going to be popular in a year? They may have run its course and be gone. So I would definitely tread carefully when trying to design something for something that's currently popular right now.
By now, I've been bombarding Jon with questions for about 25 minutes. And as I came to the end of my interview, I started asking those classic closer questions that perhaps you'll get accustomed to me asking. One of them was, were there any games that Jon had seen, licensed games Jon had seen, that he wished he had designed and developed? I thought his humility shone through when he responded with this.
Yeah, every time I play a game. Right now, the game that I'm the most jealous of is Batman Gotham City Chronicles from Monolith. First of all, it's a theme. It's a license that I would absolutely kill for. Batman is my white whale. I would love to make something in the Batman universe. Also, we talk a little bit about how certain themes or certain mechanics kind of come and go and become popular and then recede. It's a kind of a skirmishy dungeon crawly kind of game, which I think for the most part has been done to death right now. And I would love to be able to do a dungeon crawler kind of game, scenario based game that is really crunchy and has a really visceral feel to it. But anytime I try and sit down and make one of those types of games, I just look at 1,000 games that have already done it so well that it's like, it's what am I going to bring here that's new, that's fresh, that I can make better than somebody else. And in that specific genre, I don't think I could. I make games that are a little bit different than that, but I love playing them, and specifically playing this Batman game. Every time I sit down, I go, oh man, that was so cool. That was so darn cool. I wish that I'd come up with this. I wish that this was my baby.
And as I came to the end of my interview, I asked that cliche of cliche questions. If you had one piece of advice to give a budding game designer out there, what would it be?
Well, I guess my answer is going to have to end up being equally cliche because it's the same advice that I feel like most people end up saying in this situation, but it's so true that it's worth repeating. Sure. You just have to do it. There's 1,000 ways that you can sit and say, this idea isn't good enough. This isn't great. The biggest lesson I have ever learned in this industry and also in like writing or whatever it is, I always used to think that people who got things published were masters at that craft, and they only went and tried to get everything published once they had mastered it. And the truth couldn't be further from that. The only difference stopping somebody who got something published from somebody who didn't get something published is that they finished it. They did the whole thing. They started at the beginning, and at no point from the beginning to the end did they say, nah, this is dumb, I quit. Sometimes an idea is dumb and you do have to quit that and move to the next one. But for the most part, all it takes is having the wherewithal to sit there and say, okay, this isn't working. How do I make it work? What's the next step in getting me to the point where this is a completed project that I'm proud of? Unless you sit down and actually just try to do that, you're never going to get there.
And that brings us to the end of the interview. I want to take a couple of minutes out again to say a huge thank you to Jon for spending any time with me. He was incredibly humble, incredibly knowledgeable, and a really nice, fun guy to speak with. He's produced a number of games that I'm going to link below because I don't think we spent enough time talking about them in the actual interview. And he also hosts a podcast called Making the Dough Show, which I'm also going to link, as well as a reference to his website, which is breadandcircuses.rocks. You can find out all about Jon and his games on those links. If you did like the video, give me a thumbs up. If you really like this whole spiel of me talking to people and asking really absurd questions, then consider subscribing. But for now, and until next time, YouTube, take care.